The Philadelphia Eagles have their new coordinators for the 2023 season. We have our thoughts coming up next. It's a Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Tuesday edition of the show. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by my co-host Gino Camilleri. You can find our show Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Gino, we got a lot of news to talk about today. The NFL Combine is officially this week. Workouts start tomorrow. But of course, with the Combine comes a lot of NFL news. All 32 teams are down there. News circulates about trade rumors. Who's going to do what with free agency? Coaches talk to the media. So do general managers. Howie Roseman, as we speak, is sitting down with the media at his press conference. And what we heard today was all about the hiring process for the Eagles. They have their two new coordinators officially filled for 2023. Quarterback coach of 2022, Brian Johnson, has been named the new offensive coordinator. And then the new defensive coordinator replacing Jonathan Gannon is Sean Desai, who was the assistant head coach of the Seattle Seahawks, also the Chicago Bears defensive coordinator in 2021. Gino, your overall thoughts about these two hires?
You tweeted it earlier. I don't think they could have done a better job replacing those two individuals, because what they get in Brian Johnson and Sean Desai is not a deviation from what worked last year. What I mean is that they are not deviating from that offensive system that worked and the Fangio philosophy that ultimately Nick Sirianni has talked about, that, hey, we might change philosophy, but this hire makes it evident that they love this odd front. We're going to play a little bit more zone. It's not going to be blitz heavy, but it's going to be more Fangio relevant, I would say. And they do more creative things on the back end. There's still a lot to talk about when it comes to Sean Desai and what he can do. But I think there's three important things when it comes to Sean Desai. One, he was the associate head coach for the Seattle Seahawks. I think that's huge. The Eagles love to have guys like that. Deuce Staley was that for Doug Pederson for the longest time. Maybe he could become that for Nick Sirianni in the future. Two, he was also a former safeties coach. So after Fangio left for Denver in 2018, Sean Desai became the safeties coach for the Chicago Bears. What I think is great is that Denard Wilson is a huge and up-and-coming star, somebody that actually deserves that label. If you look at what he did when it comes to the Eagles defensive backs last year, how will a former safeties coach and the defensive backs coach, who is very well sourced and very well, I would say, proven at this point of what he can do, how will they work together and mesh? Could he become that right-hand man for Sean Desai? And then three, Fangio. That's what the Eagles want. They tried to get him.
They probably wanted Fangio himself.
Absolutely.
If he
they
didn't
would
get
have
hired
loved
by
to
Miami.
get Vic. For sure.
Absolutely.
They would have loved to get him, but he
they
goes
signed
down to
him
Miami.
They signed him on as a consultant right before the Super Bowl. And so, they brought in another disciple. And I think this is more of a real disciple of Fangio, Gino, because Jonathan Gannon also worked a lot with other coaches. He was with Mike Zimmer in Minnesota too. And I feel like Desai, yes, the Eagles want to keep a lot of their same schematic philosophies intact from last year, because the personnel they invested a lot in players like Hassan Riddick and Jordan Davis. You know what I mean? Those kind of guys that fit this kind of defense more than, if you go back to what they did with Jim Schwartz and in the past in a more traditional 4-3 kind of defense. So I like that they have that Fangio and Gannon principle still in there about zone coverage, stopping the deep plays, having these versatile pieces up front, and just, doing everything up front when it comes to matchups. The one thing hopefully Desai can do better than Gannon, though, is be better when it comes to in-game judgment, when it comes to adjustments, when it comes to being aggressive versus not being aggressive and only just having one way of playing defense, because you want the base and the overall philosophy to be pretty much the same. But at the same time, you hopefully have a different wrinkle with Desai compared to Gannon.
And the thing about Desai that differs from Gannon is that Desai has done this before.
Yeah.
This isn't his first rodeo. The thing with Gannon is he was still getting his feet wet. I mean, we'll see what happens when adversity hits for him as a head coach, but I trust Sean Desai. He was an associate head coach, so he has taken more of that 30,000-foot view approach where he has to see a lot of everything, which
look at the Seahawks
hopefully
defense, Gino. They didn't have
they
a
were
lot
good,
of,
man. They were
they were
very good
really
last
good,
year.
and they were very young on all three levels of the defense.
100%,
And look
Lou.
at the development of all those guys. So yeah, Desai had more of an overall like zoomed out approach, as you said, because you know he was more overseeing everything. But look at everything that went well with that defense last year.
They were really good. I mean, look at the play from Tariq Woolen when they let a guy who
Kobe
is
Bryant.
Kobe Bryant as well. Guys that are athletic, guys that can press, guys that can play off. That's going
Gerald
to be
Taylor,
huge.
Boye Mafe. I mean, there were so many young pieces.
Yeah, and you look at I think the linebacker play of Seattle, they haven't had great linebackers outside of Bobby Wagner when he was there, but they've made do in a way that's like, hey, if you get some good players and TJ Edwards potentially re-signing and a Kobe Dean signing, I could see that continuing to take off, the freedom to bring back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, allow him to play in who is Quandre Diggs? Yeah, that Quandre Diggs type role for Seattle. I think you're going to get a lot out of the players that they do have, that they'll have a high floor in this defense going forward. But I think with Desai, what you'll get is the ability for these guys to play in a position to where they have more freedom to go and make productive plays on the ball, where they don't have to just sit back and just wait for them to come to the sticks. They're going to be pressing. They're going to be physical up at the line of scrimmage. You see the type of corners that they like in Seattle. They're long, they're physical, they can run. That's exactly the archetype that the Eagles
music to my ears.
Yeah. I love it, Lou. I think they hit a home run on both fronts. We haven't even started talking about Brian Johnson yet, but Sean Desai, he's the lesser known of the two.
Right.
Man, he is going to be somebody that I think at 39 years old has a great career, and it's only going to take off from here on out. And he could be potentially a head coaching candidate within 2 years, and I wouldn't be shocked.
And I think when you look at Brian Johnson, the other side, I wouldn't be shocked if that happens next year for him, where if Jalen Hurts has another incredible season, this offense is dominant through the air and on the ground like they were in 2022, Brian Johnson's going to be a head coach somewhere in 2024. You look at overall, I think it's the perfect fit. And a lot of other teams wanted to hire Johnson as their offensive coordinator. He's called plays in the past at Florida with mobile quarterbacks like, Emory Jones, and also Anthony Richardson was there for 1 year when he was with Florida. You look at overall, Nick Sirianni's going to want his OC still to call plays. And Brian Johnson's known Jalen Hurts since he was a kid. I mean, they are very close. I think this is the perfect fit, after Shane Steichen.
I think it's one that's not the same as Mike Groh, where you're elevating this guy who is a wide receivers coach who, if they were to have elevated John DeFilippo, I think they could have been more successful, in my opinion, because that individual at the quarterback position is more hands-on in the game plan each and every week. And you talk about the interpersonal relationships of Philadelphia and how that only extrapolates the play of how good these guys can be. I mean, who is going to hold each other more accountable than somebody that Jalen knew since they were 4 years old? You don't think Brian Johnson has a great relationship with Jalen Hurts' dad, and that they all have a great relationship? I would say that Jalen probably had some input on this decision as well. If you are going to extend your quarterback to a contract that we know will probably be north of $50 million, and Howie Roseman said that they want to get a win-win contract for both Jalen and the Eagles, who else would you rather have than somebody that's been hands-on, has been in the meeting room, knows what has taken Jalen to get to this point and to see where Jalen can go, rather than somebody from the outside coming in, where on defense, I think somebody coming in from the outside is good. It could help because you could see the downfalls of what was there last year while getting some new ideas, which I think Desai really is going to intermix perfectly.
Yeah, Gino, I think it's a perfect balance of keeping things very similar to 2022 on both sides, but having the defense have more change than the offense. And I think Brian Johnson's going to have his own wrinkles that Shane Steichen didn't have, and maybe that'll even make this offense even better. But overall, as you mentioned, and as I tweeted out earlier today with both hires, I think you couldn't have done better. When you losing two coordinators, it's going to happen when you make a Super Bowl and you're as dominant as you were, but it's never easy to replace those guys. We saw the downfall after 2017, which we'll get into in our next segment here. So the fact that you bring in Brian Johnson and Sean Desai, I don't think you could have done much better. So I think both of us approve of what the Eagles did today. I do want to get into the importance of these moves and compare it to the downfall of this past era in Eagles football. So we'll get into that coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And guys, today's show is sponsored by Built Bar. Looking for a delicious treat but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you got to try a Built Bar. Summer's coming up. Got to get that summer bod ready, but you still don't want to sacrifice taste and that sweet tooth. So that's why I replace that Reese's cup, that Snickers bar, whatever your go-to is, the cookies, replace it with a Built Bar. Any flavor you can think of, they've got your craving. What makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. So it doesn't taste like those other chalky and fake protein bars. I never liked protein bars before Built Bar. And they come in unbelievable flavors, as I mentioned. You got churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, you name it. I'm not sure how they do it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. What's even better is they're healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your Built Bars online at Built.com. Well, now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in and grab a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later, and we thank Built Bar for sponsoring the Locked On Eagles podcast today. All right, Eagles fans, it's a Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. We're getting into the news of the day. The Eagles have hired their 2 new coordinators for 2023. Brian Johnson is the new offensive coordinator, replacing Shane Steichen, and replacing Jonathan Gannon on defense is Sean Desai, the assistant head coach formerly of the Seattle Seahawks and the defensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears back in 2021. Gino, as we mentioned in segment 1, we both really like these hires. And I think these hires are very important. I think you look at what happened, what led to the downfall of the Eagles from 2018 to 2020. It was a lot of things, right? It wasn't just on Mike Groh or Carson Walsh, but what happened between Doug Pederson, Howie Roseman, and Jeffery Lurie, the power struggle and the issues they had in 2020 that led to Doug parting ways, really did have to do with the process of hiring assistants. You look at Doug Pederson making the wrong call, I think, and I think you agree as well, going with Mike Groh after John DeFilippo left and Frank Reich. And then in 2020, he wanted to double down and bring in the same guys internally and promote them. But you saw Howie Roseman and Jeffery Lurie, they middled a little bit too much in 2020, brought in all these different guys that didn't work with Doug's vision. It was just a mess. It was a combination of Doug's bad choices with his assistants and Howie's roster decisions leading to mistrust on both sides. So getting this right for Sirianni, I think, is very important. So I don't know if a power struggle will happen down the road. I'm not going to say it won't, but I don't think it's going to happen because of this process like it did last time.
No, I would have to say that, I mean, Howie Roseman is talking right now, and he said he's going to let Nick Sirianni talk about the Sean Desai hire. So that just goes to show that they have a fluid process where all of them are involved. I'm sure Jeffery Lurie, Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni are all on the same page because they can't have that hire. They can't. And everybody knows what I'm talking about. Post 2017, every hire it was a miss. On offense, every single one was a miss. And that led to the downfall, as much as your quarterback failing, as much as your head coach just being stuck in his own ways to not go outside the box. I think the Eagles have done a great job, Lou, where they're going outside of Philadelphia while at the same time keeping what has worked in Philadelphia. And coming off of yesterday's show where we're talking about Mike Clay, well, hopefully that Mike Clay hire is at special teams, where for Doug, it was his offensive coordinator where they couldn't do anything. And if you were going to restrict Jalen Hurts in terms of play calling, they're going to find somebody else that can do it. But I trust Brian Johnson, man. He has called plays before. He did it at Florida. Our friend Brandon Olson, great friend of the show, host of Locked On Gators. He had nothing but great things to say about Brian Johnson. And it seems a lot of his former players have nothing but great things to say as well.
For sure. And again, I think you look at a lot of it was on Doug with those mishires, but I think you also look at just the process overall. As you mentioned, Howie's going to be involved and so is Lurie, but Nick Sirianni talked about how, at the end of the day, this is going to be his decision. And I like that this probably was him at the forefront. So keeping that balance, I think, again, that structure and the power dynamic in 2020, it was a mess. It didn't work anymore because neither side trusted each other. Because Doug could have said, well, Howie, I mean, yeah, my coaches, it didn't work out, but I mean, the roster you put in front of me was incredibly bad. So how much can the coaches really do? And then on Howie and Lurie's side, it's like, the court that we gave you full control, and then you bring in these guys and it clearly didn't work either. So it was just an overall mess. And so just having that continuity and having everybody on the same page is so important. And I think this is going to go way better. So again, I'm not saying in a few years, Nick Sirianni might not want more say in the front office. Who knows what happens with a head coach that gets more and more success. And he's more upfront than Doug is as well. He's not as passive. But I will say again, I don't think a power struggle would happen. The downfall won't happen the same way it did last time because, as we both mentioned already, these two coordinators, I think, are as good of replacements as you can think of, and Desai, might even be an upgrade over Jonathan Gannon. I'm feeling pretty confident about that.
I'll offer your point right there, Lou. I mean, if you look back at what Chip Kelly was and what Doug Pederson was, is Nick Sirianni and what he has been doing, not the perfect middle for both of those guys, to where Nick, it seems like he's on the same page with Howie. And it was evident, Lou, even before all that stuff came out about the 2017 team, that there was definitely that power struggle. We knew that when it came to the coordinator hires. We had heard all the stories of Howie wanting to go outside and Doug wanting to stay in-house.
Yep.
And I think this might be the most cohesive you've seen since the Reed days, where everybody seemed to be on the same page with him and Banner and Lurie. Everything was just clicking in terms of who had too much say, who had enough say. It was a perfect checks and balances where Chip was almost to a dictatorship-esque type of capacity, and Doug Pederson had this oligarch type of thing where he kept his friends in-house, where Nick Sirianni's like, nah, I just want the best guy outside of Michael Clay. I just want the best coordinator for the job. And ultimately, it seems that Howie Roseman, when it comes to team building, sees what Sean Desai does. And why my eyes were going everywhere in that first segment for those watching on YouTube, I was pulling up just some numbers here on what Sean Desai did in terms of personnel and deployment. Last year, he played nickel 54% of the time. He played base 28.7% of the time and dime 17% of the time. And I looked at Poona Ford, for example, who's a 3-tech in their defense, and his snaps when it comes to deployment. They ran 2 down fronts, so that's 2 defensive linemen with 4 linebackers, so that's probably going to be 2 stand-up guys. They ran that 34% of the time. They ran 3 down fronts. What is that? Let me do the math. 24 plus 35, that's 59% of the time, and 4 down fronts 7% of the time. So it is a very versatile defensive structure. They're going to play 2 high. They're going to play 3 high. They're going to intermix those coverages on the back end where they show one thing, make it look like another. Think of those Legion of Boom teams and completely throw that away, because that was nothing like what they were doing under Fangio, where Fangio, he is going to be more upfront. You look at those Legion of Boom teams, it was like, we're going to play cover 3, cover 1, and just stay off and read everything underneath. No, this is a Fangio-style defense where they're going to be physical. If you want to see somebody who is basically the prototype of a Fangio defense, look up Bryce Callahan over the last couple of years. He's played in Chicago. He played for Denver.
Yep.
He's very physical. He's very athletic. They allow him to do a lot of different things when it comes to playing press, when it comes to playing off. They really give their defensive backs the freedom.
Music to my ears, Gino. It just sounds open-minded. That's the overall theme, and that's what I'm looking for.
Right. When you have those 2, 3, 4 down fronts where you're intermixing things, allowing different looks, where the linebackers are going to come in and out, mugging the A-gap, going outside. I don't see Hassan Riddick playing as much coverage as he did last year, because they're going to want to get guys to the quarterback, because they're going to press you on the back end. They're going to try and read everything, bend, don't break, and try and get as many interceptions and turnovers as possible. Look at Tariq Woolen last year, Lou. If Tariq Woolen could do what he did in that defense, imagine Darius Slay allowing to be exactly who Darius is.
Well, and Gino, they're going to have younger defensive backs probably this year, or at least one. I would guess right now. I mean, they're probably going to bring in a free agent cornerback if they lose James Bradbury, but I think they're going to take a corner in the first round. And when you have a young defensive backfield, look at what Desai had in Seattle. I mean, yeah, they had Quandre Diggs, but Tariq Woolen and Kobe Bryant were two of the best rookies in the entire league, and they were both day 3 selections in the defensive backfield, both Senior Bowl standouts, but, weren't guys that, we did, but weren't guys that many expected to be a first-round selection. So, yeah, I think everybody's on the same page. I feel really good about who these new coordinators are, and so who knows what's going to happen down the road in the future, but everything looks like it's just smooth. And even as you mentioned, like who Howie Roseman brings in on this defense now and last year too, it lines up exactly, it feels like, with what the coordinators want. So hopefully then that can change without team success and with injuries and that kind of stuff. But the roster looks good and the coaching staff looks good as well. Agreed. Coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, we're going to wrap up the show by making fun of the Tennessee Titans. Apparently they did not learn their lesson after what A.J. Brown did to them last year. So we'll get into that to wrap up the show. This is Locked On Eagles. All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up a Tuesday edition of Locked On Eagles. And, today the scouting combine continues with a lot of the media availability for general managers and head coaches. Howie Roseman spoke with the media not that long ago. And it was funny, the Tennessee Titans general manager, the new Titans GM, because A.J. Brown got the old one fired, Rand Carthen, clearly did not learn from what happened with, it's John Robinson, right? Was the old GM?
Yep. Old JR.
He gets fired 2 days after A.J. Brown goes nuclear on the Tennessee Titans. And today in his press conference talking about what creates an NFL winner, what does it take to win a championship? This was his quote. He said, "It's sexy to play Golden State Warriors football in September and October, but the teams that play in January play tough defense and run the football." I'm not sure if he missed what that Super Bowl was, who has won 2 championships in the last 4 years. That game was a complete shootout where both teams had to throw the football. Elite quarterbacks win every single year. And the Tennessee Titans are just never going to learn. And they literally fired their last GM because A.J. Brown showed what it takes to be a consistent winner, and they traded that away. It's throwing the football with elite weapons. Man, I would hate to be a Tennessee fan, man. I don't know. I was scared the Eagles could become that kind of team. They're not.
Are they the Dallas Cowboys of the AFC?
Just like destined for the divisional round. I don't even think that anymore. They're not going to be a playoff team this year.
No, absolutely not. And Lou, I think it was a funny conversation in looking back on what happened here in 2022, that the Super Bowl was exactly what we were talking about 2 years ago when we were saying, what does this offense have to become?
Yeah.
Well, they have to be able to score 35 points. They have to be able to throw, and they have to be able to run when it was necessary. Well, their run game didn't get going in the Super Bowl as much as it took them to get them there. Their running game really wasn't necessary to be in that game with Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, let's say they take the lead and they might have to run a little more, but they didn't set up the run outside of Jalen Hurts being a dominant athlete. No. It was throwing the football. And yesterday's show, we were talking about replacing our wide receiver 3 because we want to go from 35 to potentially 41 points a game, 42 points a game, and you win in the margins there. And if you're looking at teams right now, Lou, where even though I do make fun of the Dallas Cowboys, where Tony Pollard comes in and he's just super explosive with a low round pick, and so is Kenny Gainwell, and so are all these guys across the league, the Isaiah Pacheco's, and you're going to go and pay Derrick Henry this crazy money and still try and force this narrative that running the football does win championships. Look at what Patrick Mahomes and the Eagles just did, and the Eagles past Super Bowl. Like, passing wins this sport. It's what it comes down to. And the quarterback position is what you need. And that's something you say when you don't have a quarterback, number one. And two, you don't have an option going forward at quarterback because you probably don't trust Malik Willis being a new general manager. That was John Robinson's pick.
Well, and Howie Roseman even said today in his press conference, you either have to pay the quarterback or you're still searching for one. And so, yeah, I don't know if it's just like he's in denial or if that's his true philosophy because he knows he's not going to have a quarterback this year. But yeah, running the football and playing good defense helped the Eagles make a Super Bowl. They ran down the throats of the number one defense to make the Super Bowl. But, as you mentioned, when the run game doesn't work in the biggest game, you have to be able to throw the football. The passing game needs to be featured. The Eagles still put up over 30 points without being able to run. If they, let's say it's the opposite, they're having no luck passing. Are they putting up 30 plus points running the football? No they way. Have that capability at times, but consistently.
That's what we were discussing 2 years ago, Lou.
Right.
That's the exact thing.
Exactly. If you're going to have a changeup in football, that's the run game. The run game can't be your fastball. That's the passing game. The Tennessee Titans still do not understand that. And they literally had their last GM fired because I thought at least it opened their eyes when A.J. Brown destroyed them when they played in Philadelphia, but clearly not. And I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to run it back with what? Ryan Tannehill, and they only have Treylon Burks now. Robert Woods is gone, and they're going to use Derrick Henry, who's had 1 billion touches the last 5 years. I don't know. I mean, I'm really glad the Eagles, they knew that they had a special run game, and they're definitely going to always build around that with a mobile quarterback and an elite offensive line. But they knew what the Titans didn't last year, that that's not enough, and they continued to not settle. And now the Eagles, to me, are the most balanced team in the NFL, and Tennessee didn't make the playoff.
And it's great when you have the quarterback. And that's a great analogy with the fastball, Lou, because I'm a Yankee fan, and I know a lot of people don't like the Yankees, but I've lived through them for my whole life now. And they have Garrett Cole, and Garrett Cole's a fastball pitcher. And when the fastball's working, much like the run game, it can work. But when it doesn't work, you could get battered. I've seen Garrett Cole have all-star performances, and I've seen him throw games where he's just throwing lollipops and he's getting absolutely obliterated. And that's what the run game is. If you are reliant on that, Lou, and it doesn't work, right, and you can't get a pass game going, that's when you're losing games 35-7, 37-14. Those are the type of games that's the Eagles-Giants game. That's exactly what that was. When Saquon Barkley couldn't get going, the Eagles turned it around,
and then on the opposite
and they
side,
shut him down.
And then on the opposite side, you look at like 2017 for the first half of the year, 2018, the Eagles could not really run the football. And they still were the best team in football the first half of the season. And in 2018, they still nearly got back to the NFC Championship with Wendell Smallwood in the backfield. So I'm not saying, again, that running the football isn't important, but the fact that Tennessee still says that it's the bread and butter like it's 2003 is crazy. And I'm glad the Eagles are not in that position for sure. We've got a lot more coverage down in Indianapolis for the NFL Scouting Combine. Workouts officially start tomorrow. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Eagles. We still got 3 more shows this week for you, and every week throughout the offseason, available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Also, hit us up on Twitter at Locked On Birds, at GC24_football, and at DiBiase LOE. Once again, thanks for making Locked On Eagles your first listen every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez provide in-depth coverage of the biggest NFL draft prospects with deep dives into sleepers and hidden gems that can change your favorite NFL franchise. You can find Locked On NFL Draft wherever you get Locked On Eagles. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. We'll see you tomorrow for another edition of Locked On Eagles. As always, thank you for downloading. Thank you for watching and listening. And let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.